Morning, folks. Celtic didn't have things go their way against Rangers yesterday. 1-0 defeat at Ibrox in the derby, and we're here to have a chat about it. Look at where things went wrong and where they could have gone right. I suppose a lot of positivity and anticipation heading into the game for Celtic, and it didn't really pan out the way that a lot of people expected and the way that everyone, I suppose, would have hoped. Sean and Alison with me as normal on a Monday. Alison, we'll come to you first. Were you disappointed in the way that it panned out yesterday, or were you approaching the game with a bit more trepidation than many others?
I think I think from a Celtic perspective, I think there was a real sense of anticipation. I think the way that the team had been playing in the build up to the game, coupled with the fact that I think Rangers have been going through quite a sticky patch domestically, in addition to all the COVID issues. They were a weakened side. They didn't have Steven Gerrard in the touchline. I think there was a genuine sense of optimism. I don't think anyone would have predicted that Celtic wouldn't score, just given the ease with which they have been doing. I think that's the first of 11 games under Postecoglou that they haven't managed to find the net. So I think there was a real sense of optimism going into the game. Yet what essentially was played out could have been a greatest hits, really, of the last 20 months in these fixtures. I think Celtic enjoyed a lot of the ball, created chances, didn't take chances. And I think you would have to say right now that Rangers are a team who just look to have the edge in this fixture in terms of the psychology and the mentality.
Sean, I was just saying to you there that the USP of this Celtic side is that we will score against you, and didn't manage it yesterday. But is it also easy to forget that, yes, Alison recognises Rangers haven't been as solid as they were last season, but this is still a defence, albeit with Balogun at right back, that were stopping a lot of teams from scoring against them last year. And Celtic now, with their new look Celtic, are just another one added to that list.
I think it's got value, that, yeah, because I mean, realistically, despite the fact there was a few players out, it was McGregor and Tavernier, big characters, right enough, but that those are the only two really. The rest of the team were, as far as I can see, their first choice 11 for the most part. Balogun obviously had a good game. I don't think that either Juranovic or Kyogo down that side really tested them. Kyogo's game, I kind of mentioned it with Tony yesterday in the debrief, that Kyogo's game isn't really facing a guy up and taking him on one-on-one. I think he arguably should have done it maybe a wee bit more, because I think he would have got joy out of it. But his game is mostly off the ball runs and being found with the pass and different things like that. And he was still making the runs, he just wasn't being found. Sometimes that was, I don't know if it was the occasion, or because I don't think it was the pressure of the Rangers midfield, because I think that all three of Celtic's midfielders had opportunities to find him. I just don't think they looked up to see him. Maybe it was because he was out wide left. I think Ange Postecoglou's already mentioned that he almost regrets not playing him through the middle. I think most Celtic fans probably would agree that he looked better through the middle. He has looked better through the middle in other games, and he looked better through the middle yesterday as well. I think he caused the centre halves of Rangers problems from the minute that he moved. So in that respect, I think that defence of Rangers could have been got at more. That said, Alison alluded to it, Celtic did still create a couple of chances. Bit more composure, and in Edouard's case, maybe even just a wee bit of luck in terms of the timing, and it could be a whole different story.
Yeah, bad miss from Edouard. These things happen. Some of the best strikers in the world miss chances you'd expect them to score, so I don't think really can be held too much against them for that. Barry McGlone's in the comments saying that Kyogo not getting played through the middle was obviously a mistake. I think 99% of Celtic fans would probably go along with that, because, Alison, it was only with about 20 minutes to go that Kyogo was put through the middle, and there were three moments where he could have scored. The first one, McCrory came out, saved well. The second one, he went for the shot instead of squaring it to Christie, and then I think he was overthinking the next chance where he tried to square it instead of probably take the shot himself. I think that he realised he was too desperate to make amends, I think, for not passing it the first time. But it's clearer and clearer by the game that I think Furuhashi's optimal position is as a centre forward and not a winger.
And I think Ange Postecoglou acknowledged that and admitted that. I think you can see what he was trying to do. He was trying to play his strongest front three. He was trying to find a way for Edouard and Kyogo to play together, and you had Abada. I thought Abada had a very quiet game. He was really nullified on that right hand side, but as Sean's just said, it's such slim margins. I think if Edouard scores that goal in the opening half and Celtic win with a lead, I think it's a very different game, and people would come out and you would laud the decision. Well, it worked well, and you got a result. But I think clearly Kyogo is more effective through the middle. I don't think we'll see what happened again. I think lessons will have been learned. I would agree that in the latter stages of the game, he was far more threatening than what he was. I thought he was very quiet for the first hour or so, other than sporadic flashes of involvement. I thought Celtic got much more use out of him once he was deployed through the middle, and I think everyone will see it. I think the manager has accepted it. I don't think you would see it again. But for me now, I think it's about the reaction from Celtic. It's about where you go from here. I think it's the biggest setback that Postecoglou has had in his reign. I think it's a bigger setback than the Champions League defeat, because I'm not sure that too many people would have anticipated Celtic going on and getting into the Champions League when he'd just come in. This, I think, was a test of where Celtic are. I don't think there was an enormous amount between the teams, but the fact is that Rangers took 3 points and Celtic didn't. So you have to go away, you have to analyse it, you have to learn from it. But what you need now is a level of consistency between now and the next game. You have to make sure that you're staying on form and you pick yourself up very, very quickly.
Sean, does it underline that although understandable excitement was starting to penetrate the support after good wins against St Mirren and Dundee and Jablonec at home and an impressive performance against Hearts in the Cup, that it's important not to get carried away when there are bigger games coming that will provide much sterner tests?
I think the optimism was merited. I think, we've discussed it on here before, while it might have been Dundee and St Mirren, the 2-6-0 wins back-to-back in the league and the dominant nature and the way that they played out, it doesn't happen that often. There was a case that the optimism was merited for me. I mean, obviously, I sat here and predicted 4-2. I'm not exactly one to talk, but I definitely think it was merited, and I think you've got to also remember that in that, after the Michelin game, which could have gotten top of them more than it did, in the Hearts game as well, they got qualification for the Europa League against what was a very talented AZ Alkmaar side. The 2-6-0 wins we've already mentioned, and then the way that they beat Hearts just a couple of weeks after losing to them in a quite a kind of disappointing fashion, I suppose you could say. I think that all came together in the way that they were playing. There was merited optimism for me. Obviously, it didn't play out like that on the day, and obviously that would make the disappointment that they ended up getting beat again harder to take. But I still think there were several positives from yesterday. We'll probably come on to more of them in depth. But for instance, I thought, despite the fact they conceded, I thought Carl Starfield, who I've sat and criticised quite a few times, despite the fact that others have said that he always comes on to a game in the second half, I thought he actually played well for most of the game yesterday. I thought that was probably his best game in the Celtic top. I thought Anthony Ralston again was really good. Committed as usual. I thought his frustration at the end with other players not pressing when he was palpable. I thought that suggests a lot about his character in general and how he's fitting into the starting 11 as a character as much as a player. And obviously Josip Juranovic made his debut out of position, and I thought he acquitted himself well enough considering it was a pressure-filled debut.
Alison, we did our team predictions before the game. Juranovic, was it yourself that predicted Juranovic would get thrown in for a debut, or was it Tony?
I had suspected he might get thrown in for a debut, but let's just say that's a complete fluke because he's gone in. I didn't predict he was going in the left-hand side, so yeah, I kind of got lucky by default. So we'll go with the stop clock and a right time twice a day with that one, I think. But I thought Juranovic did have a good game, all things considered. I think as well, it's worth pointing out Celtic had 6 players who were making their debut in the fixture in a fairly intimidating environment to go in, but I think maybe there's a feeling that they're almost as scarred now as what Celtic have been in the whole from this fixture over the last 7 games, over the last 20 months or so. I think it has to be seen from Celtic's point of view as an opportunity missed. I think you wanted to go and at the very least come away with a point, and having made quite a significant point. And I think there will be an element of a hangover in the fact that they haven't been able to do that. But as I say, I think it has to be about a reaction now, and piecing together a fairly consistent run of form. You would have to say the nucleus of the team and the spine of the team is still coming together. It's very, very early days for Celtic, but I do think that they'll see it as a missed chance and a missed opportunity.
The transfer window's now got very little time remaining, less than 48 hours, and Edouard's still a Celtic player. That's part of the reason why the headache was such a severe one for Postecoglou yesterday, because he's a big game player, but Kyogo Furuhashi has impressed through the middle. How do you balance that up? And he did recognise after the game he probably should have started Kyogo through the middle. Now, if Edouard stays, where do you go from there, Sean? Because Kyogo has impressed so much that he probably warrants the centre forward shirt, and just leave Edouard on the bench.
I don't think he will stay, but I mean, if you're going hypothetical, if he does, then it's probably horses for courses for Ange. You might still play that with Kyogo wide left sometimes, but I think, as you've alluded to there, I think of the two of them, and I don't want to overstate Edouard's, understate, I suppose, Edouard's performances, because I don't think he's been quite as bad as what a lot of people made out in general. Although he did miss that. It was a good chance yesterday, but you've already said, Andy, like, that does happen. He got his body position slightly wrong and it hit his heel rather than his instep. I don't doubt that. I think what probably worried me more was that I think he let it get to him after it, rather than anything else. But I think, yeah, as you've said, Andy, I think Kyogo has proven that he's the man for that central striker role more times than not, and I think Celtic do look more threatening with him through the middle, making those runs.
Alison, would you go along with that? But anyway, do you expect Edouard to be here or not?
I have to say I'd be amazed if Odsonne Edouard is still a Celtic player this time next week. I wouldn't expect him still to be at the club. I think he will move on and go to pastures new. I think there's a bit of intrigue too about Ryan Christie's position, about what happens now if he doesn't go in the window. Will there be a commitment and a long-term commitment to him by the club, and does he accept it? I think everyone could do with that level of uncertainty being cleared up. I think it would help the player himself, knowing if he does commit to the club and knowing that his long-term future is there. But I also think that there might be at least another one to come in too, just before the closure of the window.
I say it's quite funny, just the fickle nature of football fans, not just Celtic in this instance, but Christie was being praised for his attitude, given the contract situation and his performances over the last couple of weeks, and he wasn't his most influential yesterday. But all it takes is for Kyogo to square that to him. He scores probably an equalising goal, and the performance or the value of it is totally changed because he was there at the right place in the right time to finish off. But I suppose the point I'm trying to make is that the performances that he's given over the last month shouldn't be immediately forgotten, because I think he had one quiet one in the derby. Similar to Edouard, I agree with you that I don't think he's been as bad as some people are letting on. And yes, he missed that chance yesterday, and I agree with you, Sean, that it probably did affect him for the rest of the game. Now, you mentioned Starfield, Sean, earlier on, saying that you thought he played pretty well. It was actually Stephen Welsh that lost his man for the corner, which is unlike him, I suppose, because we've been pretty complimentary of him, and as part of the Celtic defence, given the uncertainty around it. He's been changing centre-half partners. He's not a Julian alongside him. But it was a sore one for him to lose Helander for the corner.
You're going to think I go on about this every single week, but they switched back again. I don't know if you noticed, they switched back left and right centre-backs. I keep going on about this every single week, but they did switch back, which I found curious. I don't know if he's going to keep doing that, maybe depending on who they're playing against, maybe. And it's not maybe just been to make Starfield more comfortable, which is what I thought initially. So I mean, for that corner, me and Tony kind of talked about it yesterday, and he did think it was Starfield. I said that it wasn't, because I was pretty adamant that he had Goldson at the corner. I thought Christie had, or at least nominally had, Morelos, which left Welsh, although at the time I wasn't quite sure, because Helander was in so much space that it was clear nobody had him. I suppose and I made this point again yesterday, I'll make it again now, is even if it was Welsh's man, you're looking at whether it's a keeper, whether it's the more experienced defender, whether it's the captain, someone to organise and look and say someone's not got him, who's getting him. And it really should be as simple as that, whether they're playing man on man or whether they're playing zonal or a mix, which is what they seem to be doing. Someone should still be able to go, right, there's this big Swedish guy standing at the 18-yard line with nobody on him. Why is nobody on him? Someone keep an eye on him. And nobody did, and he scored, basically.
Yeah, Alison, I actually saw a few people as well saying that Joe Hart maybe should have got a stronger wrist to that. I'm not sure that that's something that he should have definitely saved. It was a fairly powerful header.
I think the bigger concern is the amount of space that Helander had to go and attack the ball. I think that's a bigger problem. I think if you eliminate that source, then you give your goalkeeper a fighting chance. And I think that's been an Achilles heel for Celtic for so long when it comes to set pieces. I think it's something that you have to go and analyse and look at. I think Christopher Julian coming back next month or so will be a big addition. I think he'll add a bit of strength to the back line, and I also think he's fairly vocal too when it comes to organising people and helping people out in terms of the organisation of a defensive setup. I think he'll certainly add something to the back line when he comes in, but I don't think you could criticise Hart for his part in the goal.
We'll have a quick chat about the transfer window as well. There seems to be a lot of chat about Philippe Jota, the Benfica winger, coming into Celtic on loan for the season and then with the option to buy for around 7 million or so. So that's fairly an exciting signing. A player that I don't think we know too much about. There's always a bit of intrigue and mystery about these guys. So, Sean, is there something that is whetting your appetite?
I think they could be doing another winger. We've spoke before about Dembele and Johnston being injured. Still don't know when they're going to be back. They would be, obviously, you would think at the start anyway, backup only. You would imagine Jota might come in and challenge, or you'd imagine he should come in and challenge for a first team place. What I think it speaks to, and this is where it ties into yesterday though, is Ange Postecoglou kind of mentioned after the game that part of the reason that he did play Kyogo wide left was because James Forrest was out. And I think that more than anything, to me, that speaks to the squad depth issue that Celtic still have. And I think the fact that they were only really missing Greg Taylor and Forrest, but then they were forced to play Juranovic out of position, which as much as he did handle it well, it did kind of, coupled with Kyogo being wide left as well, it did kind of made it easier for Balogun, put it that way, than it would have if it was Forrest or if it was even Christie from the start with maybe Taylor behind him, a left-footed left back. And I think that speaks to the lack of options that Ange actually had to play. Likewise, coming off the bench, because Rogic was the only player I could see there that was really you could see someone coming on and changing the game. He ended up putting on Sorrow. A defensive mid. He done all right, don't get me wrong, he done all right, but it doesn't exactly inspire to see him coming on when they were in desperate need of a goal. Didn't even turn to Albion Ayeti, the only striker on the bench. So I think someone like Jota coming in, or even other players coming in, I think it is still required, because I think that although the first 11 probably is fine for the majority of games, I think the alternatives that are there are just not, well, they're not there, that's the point.
Yeah, Alison, I think that's a fair point about Ajeti. Surely his time's over now if he's not getting a shout at moments like that when Celtic need to change things up in attack.
I think there's been a clear indication over the recent weeks that he's just not anywhere near a first team choice. It will come down to what happens now, whether his only option is to go and try and prove the manager wrong. But on that point and the lack of depth within the squad, I think there's no question about it. And if Edouard is to go in the next 48 hours, as we all anticipate, I think there is a real need for another striker at the club. I think when you consider the sheer volume of games that Celtic will play between domestic cup games and European games, the number of players who go out on international duty and add to their tally of games throughout the campaign, I think you definitely need some depth to cope with injuries and inevitable issues that come. I would think another striker would definitely be on the agenda.
Jacky Marcus, it might be him. Alison, there's a lot of chat that the the medical will be done today or tomorrow. I have to say that the vibe I get from him that it could end up like a Stefan Skepovic sort of situation, Timo Pukki sort of situation, where the man comes in after a strong season, but his only strong season, and doesn't kick on or build from that. We did an article about Jacky Marcus last week with a Dutch journalist who basically said that absolutely nobody in Dutch football expected him to get that amount of goals. Around 8 or 9 of them were penalties as well, which has to be taken into account. But a lot of them were one-touch finishes in the box, where you felt the keeper maybe should have done a bit better, or why is nobody marking him at that point? He's not the sort of dynamic striker that is going to strike fear into centre halves like Kyogo Furuhashis. So I'm intrigued, Sean, to see how Jacky Marcus gets on if he does come in, because especially if Kyogo Furuhashis is staking his claim as the central striker.
I can see your point. I read the article, and I mean, the point, I suppose, would be that he scored all those goals for a relegated team. I mean, he's obviously more of an aerial threat than any of the other strikers that Celtic have at the moment. How much that's going to matter, I suppose, depends in the crosses that come in. If they're cutbacks, his aerial prowess won't matter a jot. If his movement and his one-touch finishing, as you say, whether the keeper should have done better in Holland or not, if he's capable of one-touch finishes, that could bode well. Because a lot of the time that is what you need at Celtic. You don't want to be taking 10 touches in the box. You want to be finishing a move like Kyogo has been, with a quick ball across and putting it in. And again, penalty goals, yes, all right, it's better if you can kind of get a better gauge of his all-round ability if you take away the penalty goals, but you've still got to score them if you get them. I think that's always key. When I looked at him on like Y-Scout and stuff like that, when I know it's only one aspect of it, but his expected goals were 30.5 and he scored 31 the last few years. So, I mean, that suggests that he does actually take the chances when they're there. Like, he doesn't really pass up that many. So, it could work out. There's always a chance that it's a Stefan Skepovic. There's always a chance that happens. But I suppose you've got to be positive going into this if they fancy him. And he was the Eredivisie top scorer, which is no mean feat. I suppose the other thing to consider is he won't be playing against the likes of Feyenoord and PSV. He would be playing for the Feyenoord and PSV, if you know what I mean, in this respect. So he might actually find it easier to score in a way. So I suppose we'll just need to see.
Sean, what else impressed you yesterday in a day where the only thing that really mattered went against Celtic with the scoreline? But you said that there are a few things and few positives to take from the game. So anything you want to get off your chest on that front?
I've already mentioned it. It was like Karl Starfield. I thought he had a good game. Ralston had a good game. Juranovic had a good game. I thought in the first half, actually, Celtic looked quite decent without penetrating, which I suppose is the point. But I thought they looked quite comfortable in passages of play in the first half. Second half, that kind of changed. We kind of mentioned Christie. I think that has been overstated, his performance yesterday. I didn't think, for instance, I didn't think he had a great game, but he was shifted about to 3 different positions in the course of the game to accommodate the fact that there weren't any other options to come on and play these positions. I think he played a couple of decent passes. He obviously never had a good game by his own standards, but I don't think I would put him in the kind of Turnbull and Edouard camp from yesterday, for instance.
Okay, well, it was a big week for Celtic. They got one job done, beating AZ to reach the Europa League, and that starts pretty soon after the international break, so not long to wait for that. The Derby game didn't go Celtic's way. They'll get another chance to do that in Parkhead later on in the season. So, look, Sean, Alison, thanks for joining me, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Thank you.
Cheers.